Anderson Business Coaching inspires extraordinary organizational results by engaging the talents of ordinary people. ABC opens the communication links from the top to the bottom of the organization to tap into an untapped reserve of creative ideas and solutions by the people who do the work every day. Secondly, we identify external resources that have the experience and capability to develop systems and processes that the internal staff can manage.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Good-Hearted Leadership, and I'm your host, Ray Anderson. For 30 years, I've been helping small business leaders get their people right in order to get their business right. In 1993, I founded ABC around a concept we call no-collar workforce. And simply that is taking your best blue-collar worker and teaching them white-collar fundamentals of good business and unleashing their potential for the benefits of the organization. While this concept sounds simple, I quickly discovered implementing it was not. And today, more than ever, the business I work with, and perhaps yours, are resource-starved, and people are doing multiple jobs, frequently in areas of their weakness rather than strength. And what we learned is that leaders who embody these no-collar ideals, whether they're sole proprietors or corporate titans, prove to be more effective at gauging the wisdom of the front line where things really happen. Getting the strength of their staff and the capability of strategic partners and talents of vendors enable them to achieve personal and organizational goals that were much bigger than some of the people we worked with. And over the years, we've identified people like this as good-hearted leaders. And this has evolved into an integrated suite of products that we like to provide to help people get these extraordinary results. There are 5 simple, yet I would call them not easy to implement principles around no-collar transformation, which starts with our Good-Hearted Leadership flagship. And rather than talk about those principles right now, I'd like to talk about 2 concepts that have really been relevant to what we've tried to do. And one of those is that it's not about either or, it's either and. And complementary to that is the notion of high tech and high touch. And today I've got the pleasure of having a guest here who understands this dramatically. I'd like to welcome Brian Kovalsky here.
Ray,
Brian,
thank you.
Good to see you.
Wonderful.
And what I wanted to do today is share with you a little bit about Brian's experience, because Brian has had both the opportunity to be an entrepreneur, but more importantly, he's worked inside of large organizations. And I'm going to give him an opportunity to share with us a little bit. Give us your background, if you can, Brian, and
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about what brought you here and how you've used good-hearted principles in your own career.
Well, thank you, Ray. Primarily what brought me here is the inspiration you provided me, talking about your principles of good-hearted leadership. I really respect them highly. And it's been kind of a foundation through my company, Mobile Solutions, that I started back in 1990, where I've tried to be fair and be respectful to workers that I've worked with. Our company actually focused on the concept of wireless data software. We started this business when it was a technology that was in its infancy back in 1990. But as a result, I've been able to work with pioneering teams on some of the largest wireless data initiatives of our time. One of the examples is with UPS, the United Parcel Service, where I helped them architect and design the wireless data system they use for package tracking. I've worked with large truckload carriers tracking their vehicular fleets, worked with large energy companies, working with them automating their workforce. Most recently, I've had the opportunity to work in a large governmental entity where we've re-architected their property tax system. And this is a very critical system to the operation of government because it produces their revenue. Yet we were taking an old mainframe system and converting it to new technology. So I've had a lot of interesting opportunities through this career.
Well, it's kind of interesting, because you and I have had a lot of chance to talk, and while the audience doesn't know this, we do some backpacking together,
Absolutely.
And we've had some fun conversations over the fire.
Absolutely.
What I found fascinating about what you do, and it ties into these 5 principles, and one of them, and we're going to go through these kind of, and I'd like you to help us understand how you're able to apply these, whether at the county or whether at UPS, but basically shared vision. And I can't tell you the number of times I've had CEOs say, look, it isn't about a vision, let's just get this done. Tell us a little bit about your experience on being able to, come into an organization that's obviously operating in relative chaos, and how do you connect that together?
Well, that's a very good point, and it is important to have a vision. As a leader, I think that it's very critical for the leader to share that vision with the teams that they're working on, and very importantly, to get the team members to buy into that vision. There's a bit of sales that has to go on here. And it's a matter of motivation, though. It's a matter of convincing your colleagues on the teams to take ownership of what they're doing, to take ownership of the vision jointly with you. You can't convey that vision from a perspective of grandstanding and doing it for your own sole glory. You've got to share that vision with the teams that you're working with and get them to share in the benefits and rewards of the accomplishments that they have in the initiatives that you're pursuing. But that vision is key.
Well, you know, and one of the things that I think is fascinating about your story is that everybody thinks that the only way the leader can move forward is he has to be at the top of the organization. But clearly, you've never been in that role. You've been kind of an ancillary role. Tell us a little bit about how do you establish a vision inside of an organization that you don't run?
Well, I really feel that leadership and the establishment of a vision occurs at all levels of an organization. Yes, at the top, if you've got the vision, you're motivating large teams of people, and that's very important for us to have leaders in that capacity. But even if a person is leading a task or leading a small group, they can still convey that energy and convey that vision to the team members that they have to be working with. So leadership can occur at all levels in the organization. And so in terms of my role, I was able to get my arms around certain chartered responsibilities because I was typically a subcontractor on these projects. And so we had certain deliverables that we had to make, and our vision was very focused in terms of making those contractual deliverables. But leadership and vision can occur at all levels in an organization.
Well, you know, as an example, I think, you know, if we can share that experience you had with the county here, which is fairly new and recent in your past, you know, and as I understand it, they had had the system for many, many years on a mainframe, but had never implemented it completely. Going back to the point you made as a subcontractor, tell us a little bit about how you were able to engage these people in a process that had failed, and I'm sure their attitudes were probably not the best when you first entered this.
Yeah, you know, the project there was a system where the governmental revenue flows were certainly based on the revenues produced by that system, so it was critical, it was mission critical to their business. It's not to say, it may not be appropriate to say that the system had been a failure. As a matter of fact, the system had been operating successfully since the early 1970s. The problem is it was not adaptable, was not sustainable based on the rate of growth in technology today. And so we had to really re-architect the business processes and the way the system was implemented, applying new technologies, that sort of thing. In terms of engaging those teams, I was blessed with having the opportunity to work with some visionary leaders who were the elected officials that you know, actually were supporting that system. And they were reporting to the public. They knew that they had a responsibility to the citizens of the county, so they had to do a good job in terms of producing the most efficient system for them. And they gave me that opportunity. One thing I would like to say, I was able to convince them to give us a very good team to work with there. And we were able to work with a committed team on this. They gave what I call the best of the best. And we formed a nucleus, and we were able to advance because of that.
And you know, one of the things that I think is fascinating about this, Brian, because you know we typically have ideas about organizations that are either bureaucratic or perhaps governor-based, or that lead us to believe that they can't be adaptable, or they don't possess the leadership that's necessary to make huge changes. And I think from, you know, part of what I'm trying to share here is that good leadership is no matter where you find it. And so, as I'm understanding you, what you were able to do is connect with people who are the face of the public and be able to draw in people who had seen the opportunity but needed that spark. And tell me a little bit about how you were able to pull that spark in and what you did to be able to move this forward in this new, in this high growth area.
I'd say the key term I'm going to apply here is ownership.
Okay.
Really selling the concept of ownership to the team members that you're working with, to get their buy-in to the challenges that you're facing, but then to respect the workers that you're working with through the whole process. There's really no tolerance in an initiative like this to be disrespectful to each other on a team, and it's something that one has to focus on in terms of respecting the people that you work with, sharing the good times and letting them know about the bad times, but dealing with them positively.
Right.
This is all a part of like what we have to do as a leader in an organizational role like that.
Well, you know, it's funny. One of the second principle. We've got 5, and we're kind of going over them as we move along here. But one of the things that you talked about is ownership, and to me, that's meaningful incentives. And one of the things I've seen in perhaps more in entrepreneurship than in government is we can't pay these people anymore. But my experience is that and research is pretty clear. It's not the money. It's the ownership. It's the recognition. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, there are many ways that one can convey rewards in an organization. Certainly the traditional ways of bonuses and stock options and things of that nature. And you might see that prevalently in corporate America. But in the public sector, you're limited in terms of what one can offer. But simple things, just recognition in team meetings, certificates of appreciation, small things like maybe just letting folks wear jeans on a work day or something like that. These are all small things that go into helping to convey that ownership and really get a lot of buy-in. Just simple things like having a potluck or lunches together, those things are fun too. And so it's very good. I have a story I'd like to share about the UPS initiative. Yeah. That was an employee-owned corporation when I actually worked with them back in the early 1990s. And there were a lot of disagreements about direction that they were taking. But there was one meeting that really latched the concept of ownership into me. And it was where they were fighting so fiercely about the different technologies to be used to put it into the 65,000 vehicles that we were faced with deploying this wireless technology. And one of the managers at that time just said, "Folks, listen, we are all owners in this solution. Let's settle down and let's come up with something we can all live with here." And the demeanor just changed immediately because they all realized they had a stake in this. They were stakeholders.
Yeah. And that's an important element of this, that sense of stakeholdership is not restricted to people who actually own the company. It's what they're looking for. I recall recently having a client, frontline worker, say to me, "You've given us a voice." And it doesn't seem like a big thing, but it's important. It ties in with another of the principles that we found are important, which is fearless feedback. And I'd like you to share a little bit, because I think some of what I've learned is that even though it's not intentional, many leaders create this obstacle to their employees or staff communicating with them because of who they are. They have a style that prevents them from communicating, which makes it difficult. Tell us a little bit about that, because I'm sure, both either with UPS or the county, that becomes a major issue.
Absolutely.
And how did you pull out of people those things that you absolutely needed to be able to move this forward?
Well, there's always the open door policy concept, and certainly I always practice that. But just being respectful. If a person's in your office and you're talking to them and your telephone rings, don't go and jump on the telephone showing disrespect to the person. You're engaging with a person, complete that dialogue. But I have gotten good direction from a mentor, deceased now, Stephen Covey, who is a motivational consultant, let's say. Stephen Covey had a principle called sharpen the saw. And it's one of my favorite principles that he practiced. Just very briefly, you might recall that he was conveying a story about walking through the woods and seeing two folks, using the old saw to cut a tree, but the saw was dull. And he just recommended, why don't you just sharpen that saw? They did that and the job was so much easier. And I practice that regularly with the people I work on. Talk to them one-on-one, understand what it is that they want to do, what they want to accomplish, what are their goals, what resources do they need, what problems are they having. And you'd be surprised how rarely leaders or managers and organizations have that kind of a dialogue with the team members they're working with. I've had so many people tell me, nobody's ever had a conversation with me like this. Yeah. And this is people that have been working with an entity for 25 and more years.
Right.
So it's amazing.
Well, and I think that ties in with the other one of the other principles that we talk about is appropriate resources. And I recall we were in a manufacturing facility, and it was probably the dirtiest I'd been in a long time. They were in piecework, and I asked somebody, I said, there's a big sign on the wall about safety and cleanliness. I said, why don't you clean this place up? He says, we don't have a broom. And it was an example, but part of what I think about this whole notion of appropriate resources is more about the soft side of leadership, which is, can I say something to a manager? Am I encouraged? Because I think another concept that was used by Covey is seek first to understand and then be understood. And I think part of what you're saying here is that was part of your responsibility is what do they need and how do they need it? Tell us a little bit about that, because
Sure. You as a leader are an enabler. You have to work to enable your team members to be able to be the best at what they can do. And if you don't provide them with the proper resources, it can lead to a lot of negativity. It can lead to feelings of futility and that sort of thing. That's very detrimental to the progress of a project. But even if one is able to satisfy the small needs that people have on projects, I'll give you an example. I had situations where some of the workers didn't have enough space on their video monitors because they had old ones that were small ones, and some people were getting new ones, but not everybody could have them. We didn't have the budget for that. Yet some monitors were being recycled and thrown away. So we just put like multiple monitors on people's desks and they were happy. Yeah. So there can be simple solutions like that one can do. Right. And you just have to be creative at times.
Well, and it sounds like you were listening to them, and part of that listening was it may have come up as a suggestion, and I think that's where the fearless feedback comes in many times. Guys say, look, I mentioned this 5 times and nobody's listening, so they kind of cross their arms and just continue doing what they're doing. And that kind of, the part of this, that another principle that we use is relevant skills, which is connected to sharpening the saw from Stephen Covey. And the relevant skills, obviously could be programmatic. And in your case, one of the things that you shared with me is that you were able to take this very big project and enable them to understand their role and the skills that they would bring on that piece. Tell us a little bit about that, because you were dealing with an extremely complicated piece of work in both cases.
Absolutely. There's a systems engineering principle known as hierarchical decomposition. This is a process by which one takes a very complex initiative and breaks it down into manageable components. And that's exactly what we do as project managers. I'm a certified project management professional. There's an organization known as the Project Management Institute that certifies people in practices like this. And we learn to actually take projects that could be much more than any one person, any one organization could do, and break them down into pieces where individual groups can then solve the different problems that we have. And there are techniques that we apply to do that. So it's a very successful method of solving things. Think of the space shuttle. Who could ever put something like that up just working from scratch? No, it takes teams of hundreds and thousands of people to do that, and they all have to be focused, though, on that mission of getting that up there.
Right, and that was the point you made in kind of our preliminary conversation, focus, focus, focus.
Absolutely.
And I remember when I worked on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, I mean, this has been decades ago, and we used to have a workforce breakdown structure, which is, what you're talking about. Going back to that whole concept of what we see today in the software industry, and I think you called it Agile teams.
Yes.
How does this tie in with what we've been talking about?
Sure. There are many methodologies that can be applied to implement complex technology initiatives. The traditional methodology is something known as the waterfall technique, where one defines all of the requirements up front and sets the vision for the project, and then goes through a very long initiative, eventually tests and delivers it. Some cases, waterfall has been very successful, but over the years there's been an evolutionary technique called the Agile methodology, which is based more on an iterative and an inclusive type of a process, where people from all walks of a business regimen are brought to the table to actually participate in the solution, and one works in little sprints. Like you identify milestones that are relatively near term, and you accomplish those milestones, giving the teams the opportunity to share in this success, but then to also give you the opportunity to redefine some of the goals before you go too far into this thing.
Right.
With the old waterfall technique, sometimes projects would veer off course, and that led to failure. With the Agile iterative approach, that's less likely to happen.
No, and that's very consistent with what we do, and I'd like to have your feedback on it, because it sounds like it's very similar to what we try to do with our client base, and that is to structure a weekly meeting and then a daily meeting, which is based on very specific targets for the day. And it might be, look, here's what we want to accomplish today, and have them tell us, well, look, we have material shortage, we have, there's some labor issues, we have somebody didn't show up, or something else. Tell us a little bit about that, because basically what I'm saying here is, just as your software has specific architectural needs, your communication structure likewise has specific needs. How give us a little insight as to how you were able to put that together to make sure this agile, iterative function worked?
Well, I think you're on it with your concept of having these incremental, small-scale meetings. Within the Agile methodology, there's a technique known as a Scrum technique, a Scrum meeting, where you meet together with your team for a few minutes each day. Everybody has the opportunity to talk about what they've accomplished in the last day or so, what they're going to accomplish in this day, if they have any needs, any sensitivities, and you get a chance to do this in open dialogue. People cannot talk long in these sessions. As a matter of fact, you typically have a little token that you toss around to the person, say, okay, it's your turn, that person talks, and you just go around the team. But it's very informative. It makes everybody feel like they're engaged. It makes it feel like you're not working in a silo. You're really working as a team.
Yes.
And it's a very critical aspect of motivation on a project team, to have everybody working together like that. I like to call it working like a well-oiled machine.
Right,
You know, everybody's like really working together very well.
And I think it's funny, that you mentioned that concept of silos, but how many organizations have I been in which, for the best of intentions, people are so isolated, they just keep throwing things over the wall, and some of the other side's catching it and really not knowing where it comes from or how it fits together. And so the problem in that is that there's no sense of ownership, as you pointed out. That people have no concept of where they're going as opposed to where they want to go. We had an example, and it was just really, really telling. We were in a company that was creating simply PVC pipe, which is really not that exciting as a commodity. And what they were curious about is that we were creating this pipe, which was made in different colors. Now, these are all frontline laborers, many of them Hispanic, first generation, didn't speak English all that well, and their kids were technologically savvy, etc. Well, what we explained to them is the reason that the PVC was in different color, it was part of the information superhighway. Inside of that was fiber optics. Oh. And it was amazing, the transformation in them when they suddenly realized they could go home and say to their kids, we're developing the infrastructure for the information superhighway. So, unbeknownst to them, for all this time, they've been performing that role that permitted their kids to do what they were doing on their technology. It was really kind of cool.
What a transformational change in their thought process. Even though they're doing the same thing, they transformed their thought. And silos do exist in large entities. We see that in the public sector quite a bit. They're safe. They give people protection. People develop a skill. They can become very isolated. Nobody wants to touch them because they're doing their job pretty well. Just let them go. Yeah. They're really unhealthy, though, and I work hard to tear those silos down, to share information. One of the things, like in the property tax initiative I was speaking about, for example, we used a product called SharePoint to actually create a knowledge base. And we shared information amongst all the team members, information that was in people's desk drawers, in people's heads, maybe not even written down. We had them write things down so that information could be conveyed and opened up. Right. And this is the direction that we're really taking in the industry today. Everything is open. There's a lot of open data. There's a lot of discussion of open source code. And so we want to be more open in our communications and engage people. It's very important.
Well, and I think we're seeing that on the internet, and part of what I think is fascinating, and you have a smartphone, I have a smartphone, and I'm always intrigued as I go into organizations, and I find people tell them turn off your smartphone, and it's the most powerful communication device ever created by man. And part of what I'm hearing with your mobile solutions, Brian, is that that's one of the things you bring to the party, is that how can we use that tool to share information, perhaps on the intranet? Is that possible? Can you do that with a mobile phone? Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely, and it's really the most, I feel it's one of the best inventions of our life here, is this whole mobile communications technology, how it's enabled us to not have to work with the chains of an office building or construct. We can actually work in the way we need to work in a mobile type of fashion. I like that. But it goes back to respect. Whenever we're in meetings and things of that nature, it's just basically disrespectful for one to not pay attention to what's going on within that meeting, and then to still instead just focus on what's happening with your iPhone. I know it's very tempting, but one really has to think about, that interaction with the team and the significance, the value that we have in terms of the human interaction that we have. And so you have to segregate, your smartphone activity from the time when you need to be interpersonal.
Yeah.
And the conveniences, though, that one gets from the smartphone and the immediacy of information, it's a great benefit to our lives, I think.
And one of the neat things that you did for us, Brian, is that, we talked about mobile phones and the smartphone, so that unlike any time in history, we're all connected together in a very powerful way. What I'd like you to help us with, in part you've talked about some huge project with UPS and the county, et cetera. And many of the people who are going to be watching this come from a small business environment, and one of their concerns is, well, that's all fine and well if you've got hundreds of resources and people and money. What do we do when we're small, and how does this work? So help us out a little bit there. Give us some insights as to, as a small entrepreneur yourself, what you would do and what you would recommend we do as we move forward.
And that's a very good point, because with mobile solutions, not all of our customers have been big customers.
Right.
It's certainly beneficial and nice to have them, but many of our customers have been small customers over the years. And I would say that the principles that we're talking about here are viable regardless of the size of your business or operation. The need to plan for your projects, to provide a roadmap in terms of like what you need to accomplish and where you need to go so that you can share that information with your teams. That's essential whether you're doing a project the size of UPS or a property tax system, or if you're doing something where you're perhaps writing a little program to help your business do finances or whatever. It doesn't matter. You still need to go through that planning process. And this is very critical, something that we do as project managers on initiatives. But then the other more soft skill related things, having the notion of trust amongst the team members so that we can openly communicate and that we can find the most effective ways to work together without all the detrimental effects of distrust and all the negative things that conjures up. It's very important. But then thirdly, the concept of leaders actually serving as mentors and coaches for people on the team. Our team members bring a lot of value to our initiatives, but nevertheless, we all have to work together, and in some cases, more senior people can mentor more junior people to actually coach them in the process of doing the jobs, either maybe the way they need to do that in that organization or just to do them right. And so we have a responsibility to do that. And it takes effort, it takes work.
Right.
That's why a number of people may shy away from this, but it is valuable in the long run.
One of the things that I know I would struggle with, and I know a lot of small businesses, but still, how can I afford you? And I'm going to give you an insight that I've had that you probably have seen. It seems to me what I find happen too many times with small businesses, particularly under 10 employees, is they have a tendency to hire the people they can afford, and they never get the capacity they need. Does that make sense?
I've seen that.
And part of what I'm trying to encourage them to think about, they're much better off in investing in somebody like you to help kick off, some high-tech implementation, rather than try to do it internally where the people don't even understand the problems. Is that consistent with some of your experience? And tell us a little bit about how they might engage you at some point if they needed to.
Well, I appreciate that opportunity, and I would just like to say that money is not the sole driver for people who really believe in the kind of principles that we're talking about. If they feel that they're doing something that would help advance them from a professional perspective, or they're giving back something, I think you'll find a lot of people would be willing to contribute something to whatever initiative they're putting forward. So money is not the only object there. As far as myself, yes, mobile solutions is a very popular term on the internet. You'll see it there. I do have a website, www.mobisol.com, Mobisol for mobile solutions, MOBISOL.com. And people can reach me at my phone also, 760-219-1177, or Brian at mobisol.com.
Oh, that's great. And Brian, it's a pleasure. Thank you for attending this and really giving us some insights as to how you were able to apply good heart principles inside of these big organizations. And again, I want to thank everybody. This has been another episode of Good Hearted Leadership. And the whole purpose here is to be able to enable you as a leader, whether it's a little business, it's inside of a nonprofit, or some large government entity. You have a chance to apply your leadership that will transform not only yourself, but the people around you, and therefore the business. Thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Anderson Business Coaching inspires extraordinary organizational results by engaging the talents of ordinary people. ABC opens the communication links from the top to the bottom of the organization to tap into an untapped reserve of creative ideas and solutions by the people who do the work every day. Secondly, we identify external resources that have the experience and capability to develop systems and processes that the internal staff can manage.